Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Knights One-on-One. Now, you seem to enjoy this format, so let's cover another God Saint, and this time I'm going to talk about the Cancer God Saint, Deathmask. And I believe he's been named Mephisto in the American translation of the manga for obvious reasons, but his original Japanese name is Deathmask, even though apparently he's Italian, and I can tell you Deathmask isn't a typical Italian name, but it is what it is. Now, we never actually know for sure whether Deathmask is his real birth name. It does look more like a nickname, and I'll get to why in a moment, but if it is so, then it's never been stated in any official source, so for the time being, everyone just calls him Deathmask, or Death in short. And the reason he's called Deathmask is because his Cancer Temple, the walls, the floors, the ceiling, everywhere is completely covered in human faces. And these aren't just some random faces, but apparently they are the faces of his victims. Everyone he has killed, either in battle or accidentally. And this includes even children and other collateral damage, so to speak, because Deathmask is a rather cruel, evil and sadistic knight. Now, throughout the original series, he is the most evil of the God Knights. He doesn't have a single redeeming quality, he is cruel, he doesn't hesitate at attacking innocent people, so he's even more evil than the Master of the Sanctuary. And the reason for this is that Deathmask believes that justice is determined by strength alone, so he's very much a might makes right kind of person. So because of that, he doesn't consider himself to be wrong, because if he's strong enough to kill people, then he must be right by default. This attitude has been somewhat toned down over the years. Following spin-offs and sequels, but even prequels, have shown him in a more sympathetic light. And there are times, for example, in the Soul of Gold spin-off, where he appears to feel remorse for his past actions, but generally speaking, most authors tend to utilize him as a rather anti-hero type of character. So he moves away from the pure enemy villain kind of role to a more Punisher-like anti-hero role. I wouldn't say this is completely right, but this is how most authors have been using him, and I think it makes sense because they want to make sure when they use him as one of the good characters, of the good guys, so to speak, then they try to make sure he doesn't go overly over the line. As of the time of this recording, we've never seen much of Deathmask's past, so we don't know the reason of his attitude and behavior. It's been implied he's always been like this, but it could be anything really. Every time we see him, he's already a teenager at the youngest, and is already quite a peculiar and sadistic character. And for example, when Sagittarius Aios tries to run away from the sanctuary carrying Athena with him, Deathmask is the one who doesn't care at all whether Aios is really betraying the sanctuary or not. He just wants to kill him, full stop. Now, Deathmask throughout the series is most commonly associated to Dragon Shiryu, and that's because the two of them fight on a couple of occasions. The first time Deathmask meets Shiryu is in China, and if you're only familiar with the Netflix series, then you don't actually get to see this meeting because it's been cut, and in the Netflix series, when Deathmask goes to China to kill Shiryu's master Doko, he gets stopped by Arias Mu straight away. However, in the original anime and manga, it's Shiryu who first fights against Deathmask, and he manages to battle him to a standstill for a few moments. Then Deathmask, who at that stage of the series is far more powerful than Shiryu, starts to get the upper hand, but Mu arrives and stops the battle. The two of them meet again in the Cancer Temple, and this time what happens in the Knights of the Zodiac series is quite close to the original anime and manga, with Shiryu and Deathmask fighting for a while before Shiryu eventually wins and Deathmask falls into the Yomotsu Hirasaka. Now, I'll get to that in a moment, but Deathmask is the first Gold Knight to die in the Battle of the 12 Palaces arc, and once again, this happens because he's an evil knight. So what Kurumada implies is that not being on the side of Athena and not having any redeeming quality is the reason why Deathmask loses. Now, his fighting style is quite strange, he's very unique, because he uses a technique called Sekishiki Meikaiha, which translates more or less to dark waves of the underworld. And what he does with this technique is literally separate the soul of the enemy from their body and throw them into the other world. And once in the other world, the soul can be completely killed if thrown into the Yomotsu Hirasaka, which is basically a huge crater-like opening in the ground. And it's been stated that once the soul falls into the Yomotsu, then there's no more hope for revival or resurrection. They go straight into Hades. However, before the soul does fall into the Yomotsu, it's possible for them to get back to their body and basically be revived. And this can happen in several ways. It can be divine intervention. For example, Athena once uses her Cosmo to take Shireu's soul back to his body. It can also happen if the enemy is wearing a surplice or sapri. These are the armors worn by Hades warriors called specters. But the final and probably easiest way to get back to the world of the living is just to defeat and kill Deathmask. Now, there is a little bit plot hole here, because technically when the soul is separated from the body, then the body is left defenseless, so Deathmask could simply behead it and be done with it straight away. However, he always prefers to travel himself to the underworld and keep fighting over there, and the reason for this has never been given. It's possible that for some reason the body cannot be killed when the soul isn't in it, or it's just a plot hole by the author or by the writer. In the Knights of the Zodiac series, this has been corrected slightly because the body itself seems to travel to the underworld, explaining why Deathmask then decides to follow it and keep fighting over there. It's also implied that if nothing happens and the soul stays in the underworld for too long, then they will die anyway just because of being separated from the body. Despite this very dangerous and peculiar power, Deathmask is usually considered one of the weakest god signs. This is for a number of reasons, but mostly because, as I mentioned earlier, he is the first one to die in the 12 Palaces arc, and he also gets defeated quite brutally by Mu in the beginning of the Hades arc. And the reason why he's usually portrayed as one of the weakest, again, is because he's one of the most evil. So there seems to be a connection between strength of will, strength of motivations, and strength of Cosmo and battle power. Now, having said that, more recent spin-offs have somewhat redeemed Deathmask, even as a warrior, so he has been doing better in more recent series. In terms of personality, Deathmask is extremely cocky to the point of arrogant. He's very full of himself, very confident. However, he's not a fool, and for example, when facing two different Gold Knights, he does prefer to retreat instead of stay there and fight. He's also a little bit of a bully, so he's very happy to punch and hit Mu when Mu doesn't want to fight back because of the presence of his master Sion, again at the beginning of the Hades arc. So he's the kind of character who's strong with the weak and weak with the strong. He doesn't have very many relationships with the other Gold Knights. He has a deep rivalry with Ayoria, because Ayoria, being a very loyal and honest character, cannot stand the kind of treachery and evil that Deathmask usually seems to choose. And instead, here Deathmask seems very close to the fish knight Aphrodite. And that's because the two of them are the ones most faithful to the Master of the Sanctuary and who seem to be most aware of his true nature. Because of this, the two of them are often paired together. For example, they fight side by side at the beginning of the Hades arc, or we see them together in the prequel episode 0 special chapters that have been released a few years ago. Finally, Deathmask apparently had a student in the past. This guy was the Berenike Bronze Knight. He has only been mentioned in the novel Gigantomachia, which is a light novel only published in Japan and a few more countries. As far as I know, it's never been officially released in English. We don't actually get to learn much about Deathmask as a teacher, but it's a funny little tidbit that he did have a student, and apparently he trained this student in Sicily on Mount Etna, so there's another little Italian connection there. But just to keep it brief, this is everything we know about Cancer Deathmask. As usual, if you like this kind of comment, feel free to comment down here, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and above all, keep watching the wonderful world of Seiya. See you next time, bye!